Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Solid series. In today's episode, we will be learning about S in the acronym of SOLID. S stands for Single Responsibility Principle, which is very well known. Most of you guys know about it or maybe have heard about it. In this today's episode, we will be diving deep into it and then understand how actually it works. So most probably I will not talk about theory stuff, but though I'll give you definition of it. Like its definition is simply two statements. One is each and every class or each and every module should have one single responsibility. And then second sentence is there should be one single reason to change the class or behavior of the class or module. I know it is overwhelming. Let's check some example and then try to learn about it or understand it. Okay. So in today's episode, I have created one simple Laravel application. This principle is completely agnostic of the language. All these principles are actually agnostic of the language or the framework. I'm just giving you. That is why I'm just changing the language and framework every time for every episode. Today I don't know, somehow like I felt that I should use Laravel, so I used it. Okay, so I'll explain you what setup I have done upfront. So let's check it. So basically what I've done is I have database. I'll show you the database. So here I'm using the SQLite database. I have this database seeder where I have user factory from which I will be creating 100 users. So what I'll do is I'll do a fresh. Fresh is just an alias for PHP Artisan Migrate Fresh. For non-Laravel guys, it is just basically doing it is just migrating all the tables into the database. That's it. And then if I do seed, basically what it is doing is it is using this user factory and creating 100 users for using this factory. So how this factory looks like? So what it does is in the users table, it will create name, email verified at, password, and remember token, all this stuff. It will actually create 100 users randomly. Okay, nothing fancy. Then after that, if I go to web.php, I have a simple controller called user controller. It has the users URL. It is an invocable controller, so it only has one __ invoke method. So whenever this class is actually initiated, this method is automatically ran. Okay, so in this controller what we are doing is we are doing multiple things. Okay, for example, we are checking if this controller or this resource is accessible by admin or not. And there may be in your code you will call third-party APIs. I think the example which I can remember right now is let's say we are getting all the GitHub users from our organization. This kind of stuff, we are calling some third-party app API. Then after getting those users, what we are doing is simply we are just getting the name and email, and we are looping through. Okay, this user all is very dangerous. Basically whenever you are using it, you should use pagination, but for this example it is fine. Okay, so I'm getting all the users, I'm looping through them, and then I'm creating the user array which has the name and email property, and then I'm simply returning it. You might be doing all the other operations in your code. That is fine. But now here you can clearly see this class, user controller class, is responsible for doing multiple things. In this example, it is doing authorization for the user. It is getting the database, getting the users from the database, and then again it is formatting those users in a certain format, and then it is returning the response. Let's see how it looks like in the browser. So if I go to single responsibility.test/users, you see here I have all the users, and it has this name and email. Okay. Now this single responsibility principle states that every class should have one single responsibility, or it should only have one reason to change. Okay, now basically whenever, let's say if this user controller should be accessible by let's say managers. Okay, so we'll again come to this class, and again we will add some condition maybe here we will, okay, maybe here we will add something like or auth user and then is manager, something like that, right? So here we have another reason to change this class. Okay, whenever the user authorization logic changes, whenever user wants to, maybe let's say here we want to add some new field, let's say if I want to change it, and if I want to add created at, and then I can do $u created at, something like that. And if I go to browser, if I refresh, now I have created at timestamp as well. But then again, whenever I'm changing the format of the response, again I'm changing this class. Okay, and let's say in future, currently it is getting the information from the database, but let's say later if I want to change this and get it actually from GitHub, then again I have to come to this class and again I have to change it, right? So this class has multiple reasons to change, and it is not doing one single thing. Okay, so for that, how we can leverage single responsibility principle to make our code more extensible. So in Laravel, what we can do is we can go to web.php. Here we can use authorization. So what I can do is I can create a make policy and then user policy. If I create that, and then I have this policy class, user policy, I don't want this. If I go to declares, okay, I want that strict type. Okay, and then I can have a public method called, let's say it is, let me split this view so it is visible. Now we have this get users class, which in this case I want view any permission. Okay, and then in this authenticated user. Okay, so here in this route, what I can do is I can use a can helper, and then I can pass in any basically any ability. I can update it to anything, that is fine. So if I type int it with user class, so what it will do is, because it is a user class, it will try to find the user policy inside this policy's namespace. Okay, and this is how it is going to detect automatically, so we don't need to do anything. Basically I can change this name as well, so basically these names should be same. Whenever I'm doing this authorization check, at that time, if we require the authenticated user, we want to check that based on the authenticated user, Laravel will simply pass it as the first argument. Okay, if we type int it as a user, then it will automatically give us. And then here basically I can go to user controller, I can copy this logic, or basically I just need this part is admin. I can go here and I can just return authenticated user, and then I can just check is admin, and this should return boolean. So now we don't need this logic. We don't need this logic. This logic is actually removed now. We can remove this now because this is moved to user policy, and this user policy is single-handedly responsible for authorizing the request. And there is also one thing which I follow. Whenever we are doing user authorization, it should never go to the controller. Okay, the request should never reach to the controller. So before that only you should do all the authorization stuff. You should check if the user is already user has the ability or not. You should not check the authorization code in the controller. Here we have this user controller, and now if I go to resource, we can still access it. But what if I go to user class, and then I have the here is admin. Let's change it to false, and then if I go here and refresh it, now I'm getting this. If I set it to true, I'm getting all the results. Now user controller has one less reason actually. So whenever I want to authorize this request, I don't have to go to user controller, I don't have to change the client code, I can just go to user policy and then change the logic. Here I can basically do this stuff. Here I can do this, and then here instead of is admin, here I can do is manager. Okay, so this route will be accessible for authenticated user who is admin or manager. So now this class is responsible for doing the authorization. Now let's go to the user controller again, and now here you see we have this, we are getting the all users and then we are formatting it. For that, in the Laravel we have these resources, like I can create user resource, and then if I go to user resource, here I have this, I think I don't need this. Here I can just return an array. Okay, I'll just split it. I'll go to user controller. Here basically instead of doing all this stuff, I can just simply return user resource collection and then user all. Okay, now basically this code can be removed, this code can be removed. Okay, so now this class, this user controller class has one single responsibility. It just fetches the all the user and then returns it. The user resource is responsible for presenting it how we want to present it. Okay, now here if I go to the browser and refresh, we will have empty arrays, obviously, because here we are not returning anything. So here what I can do is I can have name, and then I can just do this name, then I can copy this, I can change it to email. Okay, and why I'm getting squiggly lines, okay, I can add, just to make my IntelliJ smart, I can add just some type hints so it will understand, okay, it is a mixing of user class, so it will get the properties from these talk blocks. Okay, so now if I go to the browser, refresh this page, yes, sure enough I'm getting all this name and email for the all the 100 users. But later if I want to change the response, I can just simply come here, change this to created at, and I can go to browser, refresh this. Here I have created at, and later if I want to change it to updated at, I can go back again to the browser, refresh it. I have, so now this class, this user resource class is responsible for presenting the data, how we want to present this resource. If we use Laravel's by default, whatever the Laravel provides, like user policies, gates, resources, request, if you use those, all this logic will be very simplified, and by default you will be following single responsibility principle. So cheers, and I think that's it. This is how you can leverage the Laravel. Yes, for non-Laravel users, just understand the concept. There are multiple ways of, maybe you can create your own form request object in your language you're working with. Maybe you can create your repository for getting the, maybe you can create an interface for the repository which will fetch all the users from the database, or you can do that. Maybe you can create some service in your language or project which can be used for the authorization stuff. The idea is to get the in-depth understanding of this solid principle. Once you understand it, I think it is very simple to implement if you understand properly how we can segregate stuff. And that was my honest attempt to show you how we can split things. And thank you so much for watching this. See you in the next one. Thank you.